but we will have
mute on
with our speakers at the end of the session. So if you do have questions, please type them into the Q&A window on the right-hand side of the WebEx interface. I'm delighted to be joined today by Lynn Dunbrack, who led this research, and also Scott Richert, who leads the team that implemented this program. And if we could move on to the next slide, please. My name's James Millington. I'm the Director of Healthcare Solutions here at VMware, and I'm delighted to be joined by Lynn and Scott. Lynn Dunbrack is Research Vice President for IDC Health Insights, responsible for their research operations. And Lynn also leads the IDC Health Insights Connected Health IT Strategies program. Specific areas of coverage include mobile, constituency engagement, interoperability, health information exchange, Internet of Things, telehealth and virtual care, cybersecurity, privacy, and security. And if you have been in and around healthcare for any length of time, I'm almost certain that you will have at some point read Lynn's research. Scott Richert is the Vice President of Enterprise Infrastructure Services for Mercy. Scott leads a team of 380 specialists responsible for engineering, implementing, and ensuring the operations of critical healthcare technology infrastructure. Serving in this role since 2012, Scott has successfully implemented innovative technology solutions that have helped transform healthcare at Mercy, all while delivering on the promise of reliable, scalable, and cost-effective IT services for his 40,000 co-worker organization. In addition, Scott and his team has taken their electronic health record expertise and hosting capabilities to the commercial market and now serve several other healthcare providers. There's certainly a lot of opportunity to learn a lot from both Lynn and Scott, and I would urge you to type questions into the Q&A and really use this opportunity to pick their brains around a project that I'm sure a lot of you on the call are looking at. And with that, Lynn, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, James. And it's a pleasure speaking with all of you today, and for me to regroup with Scott and hear more about the project that they worked on around Epic at Mercy. And it really is a fascinating project. So I'll let Scott, ask Scott to present an overview of what they did, how they came about selecting VMware, and then this particular initiative, the My Mercy Bedside, which is with Epic. It's really a fascinating use of bringing technology to the consumer while they're admitted, or the patient really, while they're admitted into the hospital. We'll talk about lessons learned, because I always think that's a valuable conversation. I know when we talk to our customers, our hospital customers, they're really keen on understanding what other folks did before them so they could avoid some of those potential pitfalls, or certainly best practices. And then, naturally, with the underlying technology from VMware AirWatch, they're able to do some other projects. And so Scott will help describe some of those for us and what next steps are happening.
Very good.
So Scott, could you set the stage for us for our conversation today in terms of, what the project was all about with My Mercy Bedside, and tell us a little bit about, Mercy Health Systems as well.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. I'll start with Mercy. So Mercy is one of the largest Catholic health systems in the U.S. There are several Mercies around the country, and some of those are kind of our cousins, so to speak. But we're based in the Midwest. We're headquartered in St. Louis. We have 43 acute care hospitals throughout mostly Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. And we support 700 physician practices, serving 40,000 coworkers, as James mentioned, with about 2,000 patients. In terms of technology, speeds, and feeds, we have a data center that supports 8,000 virtual servers. We have our service desk is an important part of our organization. We support about 30,000 contacts a month. So anyway, Mercy's been a great part of great organization. I've been a part of it for quite a long time. We've got a good opportunity to grow. It's been a good year for us in terms of industry recognition. We were named one of the top 5 Truven, by Truven, and we also won the HIMSS Davies Awards for this year, which is very prestigious for us, and we're very happy with that. A big part of our story is also that our electronic health record journey, which started back in 2006, we did choose the Epic electronic health record, and have been deploying that ever since. And a lot of what we're going to talk today is about the mobility part of what we built out with Epic. The other thing I'll mention is that we did build a data center several years ago, back in 2010. We put a big investment in that, in which we host Epic and everything else we do at Mercy. We're a very consolidated IT organization. It's one reporting structure. Everyone in IT at Mercy does work up through our central organization. So it's been a good scenario for us to lay the foundation to do some good things.
Great. And we've been following, and first of all, congratulations on the Davies win. That's a great award and a testimony to the work that you're doing there, in which we've been actually following for quite some time. And we understand, you've built out the new data center. It withstands all manner of hurricanes
right.
and tornadoes. Right? Probably more tornadoes in your neck of the woods than hurricane activity. And that was, I just remember one of my colleagues writing a really impressive report on how you were able to really get your systems up and running after a very devastating tornado that went through the area. Could you tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing, particularly around this question of hosting Epic as a service? Because I think that really is, something that we've been following for a while, and in particular this whole notion of, industry clouds. So you're actually acting as a cloud service provider in a sense with the work that you're doing, hosting Epic and making it available to other institutions.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I didn't realize we're industry cloud until you described it that way, but I appreciate that. So what we did is like I said, we've got over almost 11 years of experience in electronic health record, and what we did is took that team that had that expertise and took that investment that we made in our data center and basically went to market to extend our ministry's impact across the country. So we've been offering electronic Epic implementation and hosting services, as well as ongoing support for the last 2.5 years. We've got had a steady stream of business. We've got several partners now, all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast and down to the Gulf Coast even. So we've got a handful of customers, and we're having a really successful entrance into that business, and actually now extending more industry cloud services and some more general hosting and other implementation services we can provide. But it's been a good situation for us. It's allowed us to bring revenue into the Mercy organization, but also keep this really A-team of experts on staff, and they're just continuing to implement and they're continuing to provide Mercy with ongoing Epic expertise and support. And if you want to learn more, we've got our website up, mercytechnology.net. It'll explain the services that we offer. But that definitely is a big part of our story, so thanks for asking about it, Lynn.
Oh, you're welcome. No, it's always been something that we've been quite impressed by. So could you tell us a little bit about, then, how did My Mercy Bedside begin? Was there underlying technology that had to be deployed first?
Yeah, so first, My Mercy Bedside is really an extension of the Epic electronic record system, and it's really an extension of the Epic MyChart patient portal. So there was kind of coming together of a need to do some management with our mobile devices and the desire to extend this kind of capabilities to our patient base, and so that's how we really started this journey we were on. That started with we had the My Mercy Bedside in our vision, but we really had to start with the mobile device management approach, and we really started in, I guess, 2013 with a desire to kind of create a consistent mobility experience. We were in a situation where we had pretty loose requirements around mobility, and anybody with a network ID and a mobile device could attach to our email systems. We didn't have a lot of functionality. We offered the mobile devices, but we didn't have much security or any management around that. So we decided a couple of years ago that we had some security requirements. We had some aspirations around getting more mobility into the hands of our users, and so we started an RFP process and a team that really pulled together the research and helped us work through those options to get the things we wanted to get around security and application functionality. And we had things we know we wanted, like we wanted to ensure that every device was PIN protected and that everything was encrypted, and we had the ability to manage the devices. But there's a lot of other features that we had to work through, and a lot of other requirements we had to work through with the stakeholders.
So in terms of going to the market, how did you go about doing that? We talked a little bit about the RFP and some of the requirements, but could you take us a little bit deeper into that? And and obviously you must have multiple stakeholders that you had to meet their unique needs. And how do you go about balancing the needs of your IT organization who wants to lock everything down and have it nice and secure, and clinicians who need immediate access to information because they're busy saving lives?
That is the trick. and we did have a coming together of, so we had an emerging, importance around security. There was an acknowledgement that, there's more and more breaches in the news, and we knew mobile devices had to be managed. At the same time, we're fortunate to have actually a couple physicians on the IT payroll, and that are, basically function in the role of chief medical officer. So they were bringing the mobility requirements of the clinicians, and they were key stakeholders. So we had this steering committee that included the CIO as the executive sponsor. We had the CISO that was bringing forward the security needs, and we had the physicians representation and IT that were bringing forth the physician requirements. And then what we did was I've got an internal technology architecture team, and we gave them the task of putting a framework around that and creating this RFI matrix that involved all these stakeholders. A lot of technical components to it, but also a lot of usability components. We ended up coming up with a 300 question RFI that we put together for the vendors.
Great, and you're managing actually quite a number of devices. What's the split between, employee-owned and company-owned? Because that's going to add to the management challenge as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, when we last looked at it, we're over 8,000 devices now that we manage. We've got about 35% are company-owned and 65% are employee-owned. So that was a big deal because we really had to satisfy both requirements. And employee-owned devices, there's definitely expectations and questions that employees have about what are you doing to my phone, and what can you see and what can you not see. But that was definitely part of our consideration. And we wanted to be as open as possible. We wanted to be able to manage the multiple operating systems, the iOS platform, the Android, as well as the Windows platform. And then, of course, it all comes down to, the user experience is really going to make or break it. So can we make it secure, have the control we want, but still make it usable and tolerable for a coworker, employee, especially with their own personal devices.
So then how did you ultimately select AirWatch?
Like I said, we had that team together, and it was led by a couple of architects on my team. We evaluated several other competitors besides AirWatch, but basically started with it was already a highly rated solution even before the VMware acquisition. It met the requirements, many of the requirements in our RFP. We liked the idea that it was part of the VMware family, and that it had the promise of being part of the overall virtualized application experience. And so if we're looking for kind of seamless experience between whether you're on a PC laptop or a mobile device, or whether you're at home or at work, we saw the benefit of the AirWatch product being in the VMware family. So no doubt it met lots of security requirements. My technical team had lots of requirements around the platform questions and lots of security questions around, pins and what the options are for encryption and what happens when coworkers leave Mercy and what are the things we could do. So it was pretty detailed analysis that went over 2 or 3 months to get through it.
So really, it's the foundation for all of your mobility activities. So could you tell us a little bit more now about the My Mercy Bedside project?
Yeah, so we want to talk about My Mercy Bedside on top of AirWatch, because it really is one of the best examples of delivering real business value with that platform. So My Mercy Bedside is really it's an Epic product intended to be put in the hands of patients when they're inpatients in the hospital. So like I said, we've been on Epic for quite a while. We've been proliferating. We've got 700,000 patients that have accepted the My Mercy or MyChart Epic portal, so they use that at home from the web, and they use it on their mobile devices. So we've got a pretty good platform of customer engagement with that platform already. But really focusing on the consumer-oriented approach to delivering services. We wanted to improve the transparency and speeding the flow of information to patients. So we decided to move forward with a pilot of MyChart Bedside. We went through a selection on the type of equipment that we would use, and a lot of questions around the logistics. But initially, we purchased a couple hundred tablets to use in our first 2 hospitals. We got to work with our AirWatch team and kind of figured out all the components. How would we provision these things, and how would we make it work with Epic, and just kind of dug in. So that's how that was our objective for this. The nursing organization was very open and pulling on us for this. This is definitely a good thing for them as well, and so it's been a great success for us.
So now, does every patient that gets admitted into the hospital get a tablet? So how do you provision it to the patients themselves?
So not every patient gets it. There's certain conditions that doesn't make sense. I mean, the patient has to be somewhat coherent, obviously, and it's also a tool for the family. But it really, any of the situation where the patient is kind of aware enough and mobile enough, if they're up and around and watching TV and asking questions, they typically would get one of these devices. So they're able to use this tool to find out who their care team is, when will my doctor visit me next, what tests are on my schedule for today, when am I supposed to be discharged. So for all those questions you think of, all of us have had family or been in the hospital ourselves, and all those things that seem to take forever to get answered. a lot of those happen faster now, so they can view their schedule in real time. They can read profiles about their care team and learn a little bit more about the people that are walking in and out of their room. They can use it to make requests for things like, I need another pillow, or I'm not feeling too well. And then a big thing for us is that it allows us to pump educational videos to them as well as part of the requirements for discharge. So there's there's definitely a lot of benefits to using the platform.
Yeah, I imagine they would, because you think, especially if you're in the hospital, there's a lot of waiting. Waiting for the next thing to happen, and trying to understand what's going on with your care. So I can imagine that that's particularly helpful for both patients and family members. But were there any concerns in terms of deploying the technology?
Yeah, definitely were concerns. This was a change in the care environment, which we always have to be cautious about and make sure we're inclusive about everyone involved. So but the idea is that we don't want to add to the workload of providers. We want this to be something that's a net positive for everyone involved. There's questions about would patients that aren't well or elderly be interested or able to use the platform. We don't want to we don't want to make this the only method of communicating to the patient, so it's definitely only an option and only when it's appropriate. Then there's more delicate questions about, if there's test results, what if there's adverse test results that actually need it's more appropriate for a physician or a caregiver, or maybe even somebody with a chaplain to deliver some of these results. So we found ways to manage that to make sure adverse lab results or test results aren't dropped on the patient, before anyone gets to talk to them. And then there's logistical things about who's going to handle the technology questions and how do we keep this from being a load, a burden on the nursing staff. And device cleaning that's something we spent a lot of time on. How do we make sure that the device not only is physically clean, but also that the data is cleaned off of it. So how do we make sure that there's no patient information getting from one patient to the next patient? And so a lot of concerns around there that we had to work through, and that's really the time we spent on the pilot was more about kind of working through those logistics. We spent at least as much time on that kind of stuff as we did on the technology, I think.
And I remember from our chat there was a bit of a surprise in terms of elderly patients and their willingness to use the technology.
Yeah, we're surprised all the time by thinking we know who our patient base is and our customers and what they want and don't want. But yeah, there definitely are elderly people that are very familiar with it. And we'll talk about a little later in the presentation. But we have a telemedicine program that uses a lot of mobile devices in the home, and we use iPads for video and for remote monitoring that has been very successful. So we find that elderly is not always a problem with some of this technology.
Right. They were using it to communicate with their grandkids, I think I remember you saying.
Yeah, that's true.
So what were some of the practical steps that you had to take in implementing the project?
So we really had to kind of orchestrate, the multiple teams. So there's a mobile device management component of this. There's a wireless networking component. The thing I didn't mention is that we also facilitate, so we'll hand out our tablets. We have Android tablets that we'll hand out, or if the patient prefers to use their own devices, we can give them a QR code they can scan and download the app themselves on their own devices. So there was a wireless network component. We have the guest network, and like most places, we've got 40,000 coworkers and tens of thousands of beds. Sometimes the guest network can get congested, so we end up creating a separate Wi-Fi VLAN that had more guaranteed bandwidth. So we had some networking work. We had some, and then of course we had some work with Epic. So one of the things that we did that I think was probably most accommodating is the three teams worked together and figured out a kind of automated process where an Epic admission would generate a temporary wireless account on our patient network. That was based on, I think it was their last name and their couple digits of their birth date. So it's kind of like a hotel scenario. When a patient's admitted, they get a custom wireless login that gives them the good connectivity to the internet. And then the nurses were given automated ways to reset and load up the devices so they're ready to be provisioned and deprovisioned. So really, it really wouldn't have been successful without that orchestration to make the whole thing as smooth as possible. But it really was work between the AirWatch team with VMware and our team managing AirWatch MDM, as well as the networking and the Epic team to make those transitions easy. So we begin. We planned with the nurses how the logistics were going to work. When they get handed out and how they clean them. And one of the things we kind of set for ourselves as a goal is we didn't want it to be a load on the nurses. It really shouldn't have been any more difficult than handing them the remote control for the television. It should be as self-explanatory as possible and not require. We don't want to turn the nurse into a help desk technician. So So a lot of the stuff we did with the automation and the custom interfaces and the, it was all very easy. They had the nurses have a handout they can give the patients as to how to use it, and no doubt they get questions, but none of the locations we've installed it have told us that it's been a problem for the nurses. That the net has been definitely a positive, and that none of them have asked us to take this away. So it's definitely been a positive thing. The last thing, a couple things I'll mention is that the nurses and physicians appreciate it because a lot of the patients' questions get answered with a device, rather than pushing the nurse call button or requiring a page or a phone call to the physician. So I think that's definitely part of their appreciation for it. The other thing I'll mention is that we did a lot of research with nursing on what the best way to disinfect these things were. So in our case, we chose the ultraviolet approach. We have devices called UV ray cleaners that kind of like toasters. We've got 5 trays in them. We can fit up either 5 or 10 devices in these cleaners, and just leave them in there for a few minutes, and they're ultravioletly cleaned. The nurses still do wipe them, obviously to get any physical contamination off, but the UV product that takes care of all the microbes and so forth. So it's been a good deal. It's worked out well for us.
So it sounds like so it sounds like you were able to achieve your objective of being, frictionless for the physicians, and particularly for the nurses who really are, spending the most time with the patients. And I think one of the things that makes this project so interesting is the fact that you really do have these two constituents, and they have very different ideas of what success looks like, for themselves. So how did you measure success for the care teams?
Yeah. So you're right. We were trying to make sure that everyone was a winner here: the patients, the nurses, and the physicians. So we have in terms of the patients, we were able to measure with some surveys, which is a good thing in healthcare. We have plenty of surveys, and I think we'll cover that on the next slide. But with nursing, we were basically measured their satisfaction. By, we were there at every hospital go live. So far, we've put this in 60% of our facilities, and we'll think we'll have it finished by the rest of the year. But for the caregivers, it was basically making sure that we had that continuous feedback. And when we installed it, what were they concerned about? What things were not working well? What types of units was it appropriate for? And so far we don't have a lot of scientific feedback from the clinicians, but it's all anecdotal evidence has been great, and also the fact that our phone doesn't stop ringing. We have different hospitals and across our system that are wanting to know when they're next. Can they be next on the list? And so the word is definitely spread. I think the physicians, we've managed the things like adverse results by allowing them to. By giving them a 24-hour, any kind of negative results, they're given it'll automatically have a 24-hour hold on it before it's released to the patient, unless the physician releases it earlier. I think that they appreciate that they're getting questions and feedback from patients in their Epic inbox rather than on their cell phone. So that, instead of a nurse calling them, I think they're able to get more things into a format that they're more comfortable with batching and responding to. So that's the kind of feedback we're hearing from both the nurses and physicians. But in general, everyone's telling us that it's improving communications. It's engagements with engagement level with the patients and their families is really markedly improved. Instructions and communications go out as quick as possible. And I think the concept of reduced anxiety is important too. When you're in the hospital and you have a question and you don't know whether something's positive or negative, the longer you wait, the more anxious you are. And so that's got negative impacts on outcomes. And I also mentioned the medications, understanding their medications usage in our surveys. That really came out as a positive thing, that patients really understood what they were supposed to do with their medications and what they were for, and they were able to understand that and also share that with their families.
Well, it's such a testimony, the fact that you've got word of mouth going on between the hospitals, and the fact that folks are clamoring to be next up on you know, in the queue to have the, you know, My Mercy Bedside rolled out to their institutions. And we talked a little bit about this in the prior slide in terms of the improved communication, but, you know, specifically, what were some of the things that you heard from patients and their families, you know, in terms of using this solution?
Well, we have on the screen now is the results of some of our patient satisfaction surveys that you know, are important to us, and also important to our, you know, from an HCAHPS perspective, it affects our reimbursement as well. But you can see that you know, this was after the initial pilot in the first 2 hospitals, the data you're seeing now. But you know, the high majority agreed that they helped them understand their medications. You know, they 84% said they wanted to use the tablet again on any future visit, and you know, most of them felt that the tool improved their communications with the nurses and doctors. So we've got, you know, other anecdotal things, you know, notes to the every hospital has a, you know, talk to Mike, talk to Lynn, talk to whoever's the president of the hospital. We've got lots of cards that gave us feedback on that, and it also helps us get better adoption of the My Mercy, MyChart, you know, application and home portal, because, you know, all that information they saw in the hospital, they said if you want to see that at home, you just go to this website and sign up, and then that's a tool we can use for improved engagement going forward. They can use that to schedule appointments. We can use that to communicate to them. So that's you know, that's something we're trying to drive traffic to that My Mercy website and mobile app as well. So this definitely helps with that. But
and there's a proxy ability, isn't if with that, so that, you know, whether it's a child in the hospital or an adult child is actually caring for a parent, you know, the fact that other family members with the appropriate permissions can, you know, both see the, you know, My Mercy Bedside as well as the, you know, My Mercy at home, if you will.
Yeah, it absolutely does, and I know I've got experiences where I've had relatives in the hospital, and I'll come in and they'll say, oh, the doctor came by while you were gone. Oh, what did she say? Oh, I don't, nothing, nothing important. I was like, well, in this case, you get to know, you know, you get to actually see the results, and it definitely helps with that family communication, you know, situation. So it's got a lot of promise, and we've got a lot of interest in, not only internally, but we have other health systems that have contacted us and want to know some of our experiences. And we weren't the first to do this with Epic, but we're one of the earlier ones that are really rolling it out strong, I believe.
Right. Yeah, I have to say, after talking with you, I really wished the hospital that my father was being treated by had that kind of a tool, because it would have been so much, you know, so helpful for me and my brother as we were managing his care. So this is interesting. So you already have hospitals that are reaching out to you, and I'm sure folks on our call today would really benefit from hearing some of the lessons learned along the way in the best practices that your team identified to ensure that other projects that you undertake are successful. Could you share some of those with us today?
Yeah, I think some of them you'll find kind of obvious, and you've heard before. I mean, the executive sponsorship and getting the right stakeholders involved was important. So I'm talking now more broadly about the mobile device management as well as the My Mercy Bedside deployment. You know, mobile device management for employees is kind of a little bit of a spoonful of medicine. You know, it's not all of them are anxious to get more apps on their phones that might have some control over it. But you know, for us it was important to kind of really get that sponsorship, to have the message coming from our leaders about the importance of security. At the same time, from our physician leadership, saying that, you know, we believe mobility is important for Mercy. We're going to offer more options for physicians and clinicians to do things on mobile devices, and therefore, you know, free you up. One of our lead doctors has a term he wants the doctors to spend less pajama time working. So after they go home at night, they have spend less time getting caught up and documenting from the day, and more time with their families. So it's helpful to have physicians on the team that help us to you know, help sponsor that. And part of the marketing, that's definitely part of the marketing, is that we're asking you to you know, install this, especially on your personal devices, install this this MDM tool, but here's what's in it for you. We're going to be able to make sure you're secure. We're going to give you access to Mercy applications and data that'll make your job and your life easier. and as new things come out, you're going to get it because we're confident that you're on a manageable, secure device, which all leads to the balance between security and usability, and those are choices we have to make on configuration of things. Our most important thing is to protect the device and prevent PHI from leaking out of the organization. So that's really that's our prime and imperative. But we have to do that in a way that allows these devices to be usable. And we really have to target the best possible user experience, or the whole thing will fail. So that's really the whole point of the thing. So that's still that's still a challenge we have even as we get new coworkers come on. I'll still get every once in a while someone that objects to having to use a mobile device management product. But the message is always, think of the total balance. First of all, no one's looking at your text messages or looking at your personal photos. That's not the way this all works. But because we're confident that you have a secure device, you're going to be able to not only get email, but you're able to get your mobile Epic. We're going to give you a secure text messaging product. We've got some other new mobile features coming out later this year. And so it's just kind of you have to tie the goodness in with the security to really get people to get on board. And it is a bit of a marketing. So the marketing and communication plan was really important for us. And and for us, it was not only here's the good things we're doing and here's the new tool, but we also had to turn off the old way of getting attached. So people that had devices unmanaged that were getting their email, we had a date where that stopped working, and that was a big bump we had to get over. And so lots of communication around that on our intranet, email, blast, and then we have in our IT organization, we have customer relationship managers that actually kind of went out and sought out key leaders to make sure they were ready for the changeover. So it's a big cultural shift, but now that we got the battleship in the water, we're really covering a lot of ground.
Well, and I often find too with a lot of these technology projects that the technology challenges are one thing, and they can usually be very well managed by a strong team of IT professionals. But it's all those sort of user issues that come into play. So I like the fact that you really spent a lot of time working with your colleagues to understand and help them understand why this was so important and the great things that they'll be able to do with their patients. And it's interesting when I look at my research, there's so much work going on now with mobile, and we're seeing huge growth in those applications, and the uses of the devices have certainly, the adoption of mobile devices as part of clinical care, has increased considerably. So now that you've got the AirWatch platform in place, what are some of the other projects that you're undertaking at Mercy, or at least considering if you haven't gotten them started yet?
Well, there's a few things that specific to the AirWatch platform that we're really able to leverage that on. We've got another use case with video-based remote interpreters. So we have Android devices and iPad devices both that are, they're stocked in emergency departments, so that when we have someone that comes in and speaks a different language, we can get an online video interpreter. For Epic, the Haiku and Canto are the kind of the mobile versions of Epic that our physicians use. So that's been AirWatch has been the platform for us to manage that appropriately. But a big thing for Mercy, a big part of our story is the telemedicine and the at-home support. So we've got, Mercy provides to Mercy hospitals and other hospitals, we provide a product called SafeWatch, which is our electronic ICU monitoring. That's got mobile components to it. We do e-acute and patient sitting remotely, where for other hospitals we'll park a video unit or a mobile device in a room, and a nurse can get a consult from not intensive care, but an e-hospitalist. And then we've got our engagement at home, where we have populations of patients, both our patients, and we manage some patients for some large employers in some of our markets, where we'll take a cardiac patient or a diabetic care patient that needs chronic care. we'll set them up with at-home monitoring and also, video capabilities with the devices. So we've got hundreds of Android devices that we've sent home with patients, and basically the model is they're going to be on a 30, 60, 90, 120-day plan where we're keeping track of them and working with them for improvements. Basically it's worth the investment of giving them the mobile device. We actually let them keep them when they're finished typically, and we just wipe the device with AirWatch, and we're able to do that securely. So, but that care model reduces costs and improves outcomes so much that it's really worth the investment of the device. Like I mentioned before, we've got our other hospital systems that are hosting Epic with us, excuse me, are interested in the bedside as well. So we've got a little consulting practice starting up around that potentially. So that's another area for us. And then for AirWatch in general, our next direction is to try to get AirWatch as more of a management tool for personally owned laptops. So the BYOD concept can be put more towards more than just phones and tablets, but towards devices running Windows and Mac and so forth.
Oh, that's interesting. So you've got some of your colleagues are asking to be able to use their own devices as opposed to corporate devices.
Yeah, that's been a demand for a while, and with our our security requirements are actually getting more stringent, so they're kind of pulling against each other. But if we're imagining if we can have we can ensure that a device is a good citizen on the network, even though it's not ours, by putting some kind of mobile agent on it, that we'd be able to create some level of trust with those devices to allow them to get access to services that they need. So yeah, we definitely have people with personal devices, particularly physicians that work with us that aren't employees that might be reading X-rays from home and that kind of stuff. So we do have a desire to make that engagement model more functional for the people that work with us that way.
Good deal. Well, Scott, it's always a pleasure talking with you. I always learn some new thing about an exciting project that you're doing at Mercy. So thank you for sharing with us both your deployment project with VMware AirWatch as well as what you were doing to bring mobile solutions to the patient bedside with My Mercy Bedside.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's been enjoyable talking to you.
Lynn, Scott, I want to thank you so much for the time that you put into this project, as well as the time that you spent covering it today. I will just a quick reminder: we've got a couple of minutes left for some questions. Do feel free to type questions into the Q&A. Scott, Lynn, if you've got a few minutes, I'd just like to go through some of the questions that have been asked, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, that sounds fine.
So first question was, if these are devices that are bedside for patient infotainment, how does Mercy handle devices going from patient to patient? Do they get wiped? Is it a new device? What's the process there?
Yeah, so they do get wiped. So that when the nurse collects the device from the patient when they're discharged, they put them in the UV cleaner, and they have an icon they hit on the screen that causes the device to reset, and so it basically reloads and it's wiped new. So there's no data retained. We decided not to. We decided to really make the thing kind of a kiosk mode. So we prevent the patient from downloading Netflix or any other tools like that on there. At first, we thought we might want to facilitate that kind of thing, but we decided kiosk mode was really the most appropriate way to make sure it was used properly and that it maintained hygiene. So the nurse has a simple procedure they use to reset it. It takes a few minutes for the reset to run, but they just kind of start it up and leave. They drop it in the UV ray box, and then it's ready for the next patient. So is the MyChart the only application that's on that device? At this point, that is the only application we allow on the device. Yes. Great.
Are the physicians using corporate-owned or employee-owned devices?
For the most part, they're employee-owned devices. Mercy switched to a BYOD model about 3 years ago or so. So there are a few corporate-owned devices that are particularly for the ones that are shared among staff that might be used, from shift to shift. But most of the clinicians have personal-owned devices.
Outside of patient satisfaction, and this is an interesting question, how did the nurses benefit from this?
I think so. Theoretically, it's less nurse call button being pressed. I think it's the nurses are getting communication is more clear to the patient, and there's not the need to re-explain the situation to everyone that comes into the room, every visitor and every family member, which they're happy to do. But I think this creates a easier way to communicate. Not the only way to communicate, and not that the nurses don't need to still talk to the patients, but I think it creates a nice record that's consistent that the whole family and friends can look at. And I think just in general, reducing the stress level of the patient is good for everybody.
Yeah, that was the one that leapt out to me when you were going through around the anxiety for the patients, and certainly to Lynn's point, and I'm sure everybody else that's on the call, having been a patient in a hospital or had a family member, you're absolutely right. The information which is which is now available to you really helps to ease that. The question, so are you using VMware's desktop product, and have you looked at the Workspace ONE product?
We are currently evaluating Workspace ONE, and we use the VMware. We're evaluating both VDI full desktop as well as the single application version of that. So not in use yet, but we are doing an evaluation this year.
Great. And are you using any pharmacy meds scanning devices? And this is linked to another question as well. Are there any? Are you constrained at all by the MDM by AirWatch in the types of devices that you're able to use?
Well, where I think it might be going is that particularly for personally owned devices, we don't expect anyone to use those for scanning purposes. So that's probably where that question is going. I mean, we have distinct wireless scanners in the patient rooms already. There is an Epic application called Rover that the nurses are going to be starting using that does include a scanner that's added to the mobile device. But that would be a corporate-owned device, and that would be a little different model.
Okay, I know we're running out of time, but question: have any patients had privacy concerns handing the iPad back and the nurse walking away with it?
Well, I haven't heard of that. I can't say it hasn't ever been a question about that, but so far that what we're hearing from the nurse leadership as we deploy these is that there hasn't been really any significant concerns or any reasons not to go full speed ahead on this. I think that's a reasonable question to ask. I would ask that, but it's really I think the answer is there's no data that actually lives on that device. When that device is single purpose for the MyChart bedside application, none of that data is local. That's all being stored on servers. So that could be the answer for the technically minded patients, I guess. There's really no data on that device itself. And as soon as they're discharged, or really as soon as that nurse pushes that button to reset it, everything's gone.
And I suppose that's one of the benefits of putting it into the kiosk mode, so the patient isn't putting any personal information on there which is outside of the Epic application.
Yeah, it didn't take us too long to think about all the scenarios if we allow them to put applications on there that, what happens when Netflix updates something, and who's going to work on Netflix problems, and how do we know they're not storing any data? So we decided that is not the way to go.
Right. The last question. Oh, I'm sorry.
But remember, there's a high percentage of people that use their own device still. So that bring their own tablets or their own phones into the hospital, and they can run the app and then use whatever other apps they want.
The last question I'll ask, just for time that's in the list, a little forward-looking. So, what device are you piloting for Rover, if you know that off the top of your head?
So, I think Rover is going to be probably we're preferring an iPhone. We've got some other objectives around clinical communications that we're looking at a solution that is iPhone-based. And so we're looking at iPhone 6 or 7 type devices for the Rover application, with an eye towards putting a clinical communication tool on there later that leverages our Cisco phone platform and has interfaces to Epic and some of our monitoring tools.
Lynn, if you're not on mute, I wonder if you have any insight into the types of devices that are being used for Rover.
I mean, I think it's fairly consistent with what Scott just told us.
Excellent. Lynn, Scott, thank you so much for your time today, and for everybody that joined the call. Everybody will be receiving a follow-up email tomorrow, which will contain a link to the fabulous paper that Lynn produced and her team produced, and has some more information about the project. The paper is also available from our website at vmware.com/go/healthcare. You can find the link on there. So once again, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Lynn, for your time. Thank you, Scott, for your time and participation in this project. Have a fabulous day, everybody. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.